Hey everybody, my name's Yvonne Villarreal and I cover TV here at the LA Times, and joining us today is the woman herself, Jurnee Smollett. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, although you should, Jurnee appears in the WGN America series, Underground, as well-mannered slave, Rosalee. So talk to me about how this first came your way. If my understanding is correct, you didn't have to audition for it, right?
Well, no, I did. Well, I had an interesting casting process. They hadn't started casting, and my agent sent me the script, and he was like, "Jurnee, this is one of the best scripts out there." And we were actually toying with another project I had been offered and like actively negotiating. And then when I read this script, my mouth was like on the floor. I immediately texted Anthony Hemingway, our director, whom I worked with on True Blood, and sent him like a chapter in text, and was like, "Listen, I'm your Rosalee, okay, and all the reasons why there's no other actress that could play her like me, and all the research, you know, I went there."
You went there.
And he sent me back one text.
Okay.
I know, I was like bracing. I was like, man, this man's gonna think I'm weird. I called him and he wrote back being like, "Okay, text me because I'm on set." So that was my text. But his response was just a picture. And it was of his pitching book, the book he had used as a director to get the job. Next to the name Rosalee was my picture.
Oh, wow.
And so he then set up a general meeting with Misha and Joe, the creators, and Toby, one of our executive producers. And then I did have to read for the network. And it all happened so fast. And, you know, I think because we did have other projects, you know, because they weren't actively casting, you know, the decision was made fairly quickly, and I was the first one cast.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What was it about Rosalee that sort of you really responded to, and what can you share from that text of why you thought it was your part?
I just connected with her so much. You know, the fish out of water, the outsider, the girl who's really struggling to define herself for her, you know, her own, trying to find her voice in a world that doesn't allow her to always speak. You know, and for me, when I met with Joe and Misha, they did kind of tell me a little bit of her arc over the first season, and how much she was going to grow and change. And the opportunity to dive into that, you know, she does start off so humble and shy and really internal. In the pilot, you know, she is not the first to speak, but there's so much going on inside of her, and there's such an inner world. And that's what I love about characters. I love the characters that don't say a lot, but there's really an opportunity for me to really explore what's going on internally. And then knowing where she was going to go over the course of the first season, my gosh, she changes. She becomes a completely different woman. And that just was so exciting for me.
When you guys shot, as you were saying before we started rolling, in Baton Rouge, and you guys shot on actual plantations, right? What was that sort of experience like, that first moment you stepped foot on an actual one? Like, what emotions sort of went through you? Like, could you feel the sort of history that's there?
It's inevitable. It's hard to describe the energy that you feel when you do step on a plantation. I mean, there's just so much pain that you instantly can sense. Just in the soil, in the trees. I looked up at these massive oak trees that have been there for centuries and just thought, my goodness, what
have they seen?
What have they seen, you know? And it's very humbling. It's almost like you're stepping onto hollow grounds, you know? And it definitely added a level of authenticity to all of our characters. You know, you don't really have to do much. You just have to be. You know, you do all this research prior to even getting there, and you have this impression of what it's going to be like. And then when you get there, it's something completely different. Yeah, it's really hard to describe. You can just, it impacts you. You just feel it in your spirit when you're on a plantation.
Well, let's talk about the research aspect, but because I think when people hear Underground Railroad, there's like, you know, those central names that come to mind, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass. Talk about like going deeper than that and like researching the narratives of people that lived that way and like, you know, going much deeper. How was that for you? How easy was it? How difficult was it?
Oh man, you know, it was enlightening, difficult at times, and just filling yourself up with all these stories of triumph and tragedy. For me, so Rosalee was inspired by a young woman that wrote a letter Misha and Joe read, where she was debating whether or not to run. And that was such an entry point for me with Rosalee, the debate, the inner turmoil of, do I go or do I not? And I did. I read a lot of the slave narratives. There's a book called The Bullwhip Days that was pretty much like my Bible on set. Incidents in the life of a slave girl, the writings of Frederick Douglass. William Steele kept an amazing account of men and women who were runaway slaves. Henry Louis Gates has this incredible documentary called Many Rivers that really dives into the span of our history in this nation. But just trying to fill myself up with so many small details of where did they sleep? You know, when they worked in the house, oftentimes they had to sleep in the attic and they would walk down these tiny, narrow little stairs. And so it's all those details that we probably don't even really dive into on the show that were important for me to be informed about. But there's, you know, there is something interesting about the Underground Railroad. We do think it's, you know, we kind of credit it to a handful of people. And there were thousands of men and women who attempted and succeeded and failed, and we'll never know their names, you know. And that's one thing that was so exciting for me about Underground is we have an opportunity to give voice to some of them, you know. Because there's thousands, and we don't really know a lot about the Underground Railroad from high school textbooks.
Exactly.
You know, the high school textbooks will kind of like sum it up in a paragraph, and they'll talk about Harriet Tubman, and then they'll move on. And as great as she was, there were so many people that we will never know who were just as great.
Well, let's talk about that aspect of it, like the history books and why it's important to tell this story, because I think, you know, one of the points that was made out of this whole discussion of diversity in Hollywood lately is that with Black stories, we tend to hear them in the context of slavery or civil rights and how do we move beyond that. But at the same time, with a story like Underground, it's an important story to tell. Talk a little bit about that sort of dynamic that was sort of raised and why it is still important to hear these stories. I mean, we're seeing the remake of Roots coming out soon. Talk a little bit about that.
The thing for me about Underground is we have never seen a television show or really a film, with the exception of a few like documentaries, et cetera, based on the Underground Railroad, which is a very unique part of our history that's undertold. Not a lot of us really know a lot about it, and it's an empowering story. It's our exodus, you know, and it's so important for us to bear testimony to this pathway to freedom and how complicated it was and how this network was made up of all these different men and women who risked their lives, people who had things to gain and people who had nothing to gain at all, but just couldn't sleep at night not doing anything. And you know, in bearing witness and bearing testimony, I think you draw so much inspiration from it, you know, and just knowing that we come from such strong people. And I think that's why people have connected to Underground in general, is it's a story that they haven't really seen before.
How about it for you in like doing all this research and in playing the role itself too? Like, how were you sort of affected or impacted by, you know, what that situation was like, and what are you hearing from your young fans who are watching the show about, wow, I didn't realize this or this or this? You
know, the response from the fans of Underground been amazing. I think at first people were skeptical. They're like, why do we need another slave drama?
Right.
You know, I would post something on my Instagram page and get a lot of people, you know, before the show aired, kind of being like, Jurnee, really? Hollywood always wants to do this. And then when they started to watch it and watched it with an open heart, I think they were pleasantly surprised to see that we were diving into the complexities of who we are as human beings, that we love, we laugh, we are flawed, we are not all good. We, you know, while the pain was definitely a part of our life, it didn't define who we were. You know, we weren't victims, we were victimized, but we were empowered, and there were moments that we stole our freedom, and there were tiny little liberties we were constantly trying to steal. And one thing that's been so great about the feedback from Underground is the way the women are written on the show. Just how, you know, we've always been strong, and we've always been survivors, and we were born that way. And, you know, just seeing how the different women work the system and work everything that they have available to them, whether it's the Rosalees or the Ernestines or the Elizabeth, the sacrifices that they have to make for those that they love, the devotion that they have for those that they love, and the willingness to do whatever they have to do for those that they love. You know, a lot of women will respond being like, we always been this way,
right?
You know.
But it's important to see.
It is, it absolutely is, and it explains, you know, when you look at someone like an Ernestine, you can't help but think of Sabrina, Trayvon's mom. You know, I mean, we've always had this indomitable spirit, you know, and it's been so wonderful to see people respond to that.
How about, to that effect, you know, having one of the boss be females, having Misha there, and what was that like for you? What were the discussions like? There may, I think, have been some headbutting at times, but that's
maybe
what's good.
a little bit.
But that's what's good. It's like you hear each other out. But talk about the importance of having a female at the helm with this project.
It's so funny. So she tells the story all the time of after they cast me, we did, you know, chemistry reads with different actors for Noah. Aldous obviously was born to be Noah.
For sure, yeah.
But in the room, I was sitting, you know, and she came and sat next to me and she said, we're going to be best friends. And it was so creepy, the way she said it.
Elena tells me that too, yeah.
And I kind of looked at her like, cool, okay, great, well, here's my number.
Yeah.
But once we got on set, I think we both were like, you know, so opinionated and so strong-willed, and, you know, really had very, very strong visions of who Rosalee was. Initially, the first 2 episodes, we butt heads.
Over what?
You know, just over small details and really trying to find her. And one thing we realized is, really, we were on the same page. We were just describing different things in different ways. And I think we just had to get to know each other's personality. You know, Misha's very blunt, and I'm very much so, I like to collaborate. I like to think things out and be like, okay, well, blah, 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 and talk about it. And, you know, and it ended up being the complete opposite. We just are like, you know, inseparable and just so passionate about Underground and had the best time. You know, it was kind of
your speed dial now.
Yeah, it's bad. Like, we FaceTime sometimes, and like, you know, it's just on the set. Whenever they couldn't find me, they were like, "Where's Misha?" Because she has Jurnee. Like, we became best friends, and just so passionate and in love with Rosalee. You know, there's a very interesting relationship you have with your writer, with your creator. They give birth to the character, but you have to give it life. And they have to trust you. It's a lot of trust to trust you to bring it to life. And that's what we found with each other. And just had an incredible experience working.
Well, what were your discussions with her like about Rosalee? Because, you know, obviously undergrounds, this thriller sort of drama, like we're anticipating what's coming, even though we kind of know, but like we want them to come out of it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's this like love story between Rosalee and Noah. How, like, what were the discussions like with you and her about like not getting too sort of consumed by this love story where Rosalee's not her own person, because she is this independent person, and you don't want it to her to just be in the context of this love story.
You know, and I think that's one of the benefits we had in having Misha. And look, Joe was on the same page as well, but having that female perspective, Rosalee is not directly defined by her relationship to Noah. She has her own storyline, she has her own ambitions, she has her own goals in life, and this is an element of it. And that's one thing that was so important to her and so important to me, that her actions don't need to be justified by the male, which is something that, you know, a lot of writers fall prey to, where the female's a set dressing and her only mission in life is to be in love.
Right.
While love is amazing, you know, it's just unrealistic that that's her only goal, you know. So it was really important to make sure that Rosalee was independent of Noah, that you know, she did have her own battles, her own flaws, her own struggles. And having Misha in the room, you know, it was just such a benefit in just the small and large details of Rosalee.
Let's talk about some of those struggles in the physical form, because I imagine this role was very demanding for you.
Are you kidding me?
Because you did
you
all
imagine.
I'm surprised there's not like lingering scrapes and bruises from shooting.
No, there are.
There
I've
are.
got like a bunch of mosquito bite scars. There was a point I had like 27 mosquito bites just on this leg.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and like, you know, it absolutely was the most physically challenging
like
role.
Going through swamps and stuff. What was that like?
You know, they love
and to know
write.
that someone actually did that.
That's the thing. That's the thing. Yes, we were thrown in the bayous, and you crawl out, and there's spiders crawling on you. And you know, the one scene when we first are in the bayou, Misha was so frustrated because she was like, "Her hair looks like a Pantene commercial. Throw more dirt on it."
That's awesome.
And so Anthony Hemingway, the director, just took this bucket of slime and threw it on me. I have this picture on my Instagram where I'm just looking up and like, really? And it became a theme where the first AD before each take would just be like, throw more dirt on her and let's go. You know, yeah, I mean, while we had amazing stunt coordinators and stuntmen and women, a lot of the stunts we wanted to do ourselves, so we would let them do it, and then we would do it ourselves. You know, when Chris Maloney's character, August, pushes me off the boat, that's really me. When we're fighting in the water, that's really me and him. You know, when we are running through the bayous, that's us. When we're running in the jungles, you know, we couldn't really complain about it because there were men and women who actually did this, and they didn't do it for a mile. They did it for 600 miles. They did it for 700 miles, 1,500 miles. And so to embody that and endure those conditions was an opportunity to get just a little bit closer to the truth.
Was that emotional?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. It was humbling. Of like, wow, how did they do this?
How did they do it? Yeah.
They didn't have craft service, you know. They didn't have someone who could bring them a water bottle. They didn't have a shower that they could go to afterwards. Like, how did they do this?
Do it, yeah.
I mean, the testament to human will, you know. I mean, it's just mind blowing. And yes, but it was the dirtiest and most challenging job I've ever done, and I know season 2 will be even worse.
And then when you get home to your bed, you're like, okay, this is heaven.
Yes, I mean, and oftentimes it was hard to shut it off.
Yeah.
Which I don't think you really want to shut it off, you know. I would dream in character, and, you know, she really was with me, and I don't know that she ever won't be with me, you know.
I was talking to Sterling Brown, who, you know, he's from the People vs. OJ miniseries, but he had a play nearby at the Mark Taper where he plays a slave who's sort of grappling with, do I do this for my master so I could get freedom and such and such? But he, you know, he said, you know, people, they say, like, you know, back home, like, if I was ever in that situation, if it had been me, I would have broken free, like I would have like been one of the ones that fled. And he was sort of saying, you say that in hindsight, but unless you're in it, it's like such a different experience.
Absolutely, and a lot of us do say that.
Yeah.
A lot of us do say, man, I couldn't have been a slave because I would have poisoned them.
Yes.
But there's several elements that you have to think about. First of all, the mental enslavement that these men and women were under was actually more powerful than the physical chains.
Right, right.
When you're able to tell someone that they have no value, first of all, we all struggle with that today.
Yes.
Second of all, when it's a law where you are not a legal human being, what does that do to your spirit? And how are you able to really own who you are, your whole complete self, if the entire world tells you you're not worth anything?
Right. Once you're free, it's like, what do you do from here?
And so the battle warfare that they were under, the psychological warfare, was very deep, and we can't underestimate that. Second of all, the logistics of it. For instance, my character, Rosalee, has never been off the plantation in her life. So when you run, where are you running to? Which direction are you running?
And how do you even know what to dream for?
Yes. If you've never seen what the other world looks like, how do you even know it even exists? You've heard like little snippets here and there of there's rumors that there's free men up north. But it's just like, you know, they made it so impossible. You have a plantation that's hundreds of acres. So just to get off the plantation, you have to run in some fields for like 50 miles, you know, and it's so easy for us in 2016 to say that. It's so easy to say there is no other choice. Of course I would have run. I would have done this, I'd have done that. But I think in Underground, what we attempt to explore is just how difficult that choice was.
Well, we're going to take some questions from social. One of them is, which was one I was going to ask, but your brother Jesse appeared in a couple of episodes. How did that come about? What was that like?
So much fun. Oh my goodness. First of all, he killed
that beard,
Anthony Hemingway, our director, had actually tried to cast him in one of the other roles, and it just didn't work out with Fox and scheduling and stuff. And so he read episode 3 and 4 and was like, called Jesse, sent him the scripts, and Jesse was so excited, and really did such an incredible job. What I love so much about his performance is that it's so different than Jamal.
Right.
And you can't see any Jesse in it. And it really shows how well he's able to stretch as an actor.
Did he tell you what Jamal's fate was going to be when it happened?
I knew months ago.
I was going to be like, is he even telling his sister?
Yes. And what's funny is my husband, like, he'll be watching, because Empire comes on Wednesday at 9, and then Underground was coming on at 10. And so he would watch it with us both at the same time and get so frustrated because Jesse and I would talk and say, oh yeah, so, like, he was watching the episode with Jesse, and Jesse was like, yeah, so I'm about to get shot.
Thanks.
Completely ruined it for him. I ruined one of the episodes of Underground, and I was like, yeah, so when Pearlie Mae dies. And he was like, what?
How sad. That's not fair.
I know, it's pitiful, but I just forget that he doesn't know.
Yeah.
It's like,
gosh, give him the scripts. Well, people are asking, when are you going to slide through to Empire?
I get that question so
I would rather there be a reboot of On Our Own. When is that going to happen? When is that going to happen?
I don't think that's happening.
Why not?
I'm sorry.
Sad.
There is a project I am working on with my family, but I don't think
Not
it's going to be
on
on our own.
Well, with when Netflix, brought back Full House, and there was all this talk about the Olsen twins, had one of them reprised Michelle, would you have come back?
I don't think I would have been able to because I'm doing Underground.
But would you have been open to it?
I don't know. I was 4 years old when
But come on. You were like the best friends.
It's so weird to me that people even remember that I was on
I so
Full
remember.
House.
It was good.
Oh, thank you.
Wanda on Twitter asks, Underground is so intense. What do you guys do in between breaks? Like, is it hard to sort of be like loose and like...
Yeah, you know, I think we tried to make an effort to counter it. You know, as I was saying earlier, Rosalee, she was with me and still is with me, but we also became a family, and it was a very safe environment when we had to do difficult scenes. For instance, when I, in the pilot, get flogged.
Yes, for your brother.
Yeah, the most challenging scene I've ever had to do in my life.
How did you get through that, and like what was that process like? Was there many takes, or?
You know, there weren't many. The only thing I asked Anthony was, please don't let me hear the sound of the whip, you know. And again, the trees really did something to me. They impacted me in a way, and I just kept thinking of Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit. And, you know, up until then, I over-talked about this with Misha and Joe and Anthony, and we were debating different ways to do it. I kept saying, guys, it's not on the page, and we kind of went through the motions a little bit with PJ just to kind of like, you know, understand where the placement and of it all would be, and that it just didn't feel right. And I had done so much research and looking at these images of these beautiful bodies who had just been ransacked, and read so many narratives of how dehumanizing it is to go through that. And honestly, on the day of, the only thing I said to Anthony was, don't let me hear the sound of the whip, and I refused to talk about it with anyone anymore, and just tried to surrender and like prayed to just be used. And you know, when I went out, and when the first take we did it, we didn't rehearse, the first take we did, Anthony just kept the cameras rolling. When I looked at my little brother and saw his little face, and little Maceo was so brilliant in that scene. When I saw what Bill was doing to him, it all clicked in that moment. And that's what I realized what was missing. We had gone through the motions without him. And when I looked at him, the strength to sacrifice myself, to do whatever I had to do to make sure he didn't get injured, clicked for me. And the vulnerability of, oh my gosh, I have to do whatever I have to do. This little boy cannot experience this. It clicked, and we did it a few takes. Anthony just kept the camera rolling, and afterwards I was shaking and crying and couldn't stop. And Misha and Anthony, Amira, and Aldous just kind of like gave me a group hug and surrounded me and let me cry for like 10 minutes. And that's the kind of safe environment we had. So when we had to go there emotionally, we knew we had people there to just allow us to feel it. But to counter that, you know, on weekends, we would cook, we would barbecue, we would do things sometimes on our off day. Aldous had a good idea to treat the crew, because our crew was so amazing and they were so overworked.
What did you guys do?
So on one of our off days, the guys took over the catering truck and made a bunch of beignets, and me and Amira served it to the entire crew. Dusted it with sugar, and they were so grateful and so happy. So, you know, we would do things like that. Aldous can cook, so he can cook really good. So he was always trying to like get us to come over. We'd play games, and he made like some crab meat one time, and like beer battered crab or something. It was like really extravagant.
Okay, I want to come to set when this happens.
Okay, you have to.
Please tell me the next time Aldous is cooking.
It was really good.
Well, I don't know how, like, have you gotten a script for season 2 yet for the premiere?
No, they're writing, but we're supposed to start shooting pretty soon this summer.
Well, so what do you hope to see from Rosalee this season, and are you sort of prepared for some more sort of intense scenes that
I don't think I am. No, I'm just trying to start preparing. I just wrapped a film I was doing in New York with Wendell Pierce. We were shooting in Atlanta, New York, just like 2 days ago. And so now I'm starting to get back into research and reading more, and just trying to fill myself up with that. But you know what? I'm excited for season 2.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of what they told me, it is going to be insane. Like, I thought season 1 was nuts, but what they have for season 2, it's crazy. I mean, I know that, like, as you saw in episode 10, you know, I link up with Harriet Tubman, and I'm going back. But yeah, it's about to be crazy.
It's about to be crazy.
Yeah, it's about to be crazy.
Well, that's, I think, enough incentive for us to tune in.
Yes, trust me. Trust me. They got an inch with season 1. Season 2, they're taking the whole mile.
Okay. Very cool. Well, Jurnee, thanks so much for joining us. It was a
Thank you
pleasure
for
talking
having
to
me.
you. And thanks, everyone, for your questions and for tuning in. Check out our next live chat. Thanks.